we're live. I didn't count down this time. I forgot to count down. Anyway, what's up? My name is James. I'm the owner of McCool. Today we're going to be doing a Mondays with McCool slate review. As usual, I am joined by Mr. Blender, Mr. Jordan Cooper, Mr. Stupid Saturdays himself. How you doing today, Mr. Sir?
Good. I made money yesterday, so that means I'm in a good mood. Cash, both DraftKings and FanDuel made money in GPP on DraftKings, and I'm good. It ends up that my diversification that I do between FanDuel and DraftKings was the main reason that I made money, because if I didn't, I would have lost on both sides.
What was the diversification that you did?
Well, the thing is, you don't have to, but if I'm going to play FanDuel cash, and I tend to play towards the end of the season more on FanDuel than I do on DraftKings as far as cash is concerned. I think FanDuel is softer. You look at some of the bottom 10, 20 lineups and some of those 100-man 50-50s, you'll see some awful lineups, and same for the double ups. More so than on DraftKings. On DraftKings, although you'll get the bigger double ups. So you get to play a double up with 459 and that was 1,100. So you get a lot of shit lineups in there also. But on DraftKings, I originally, my dummy lineup heading into Sunday morning was going to be what was like kind of a train on DraftKings. It was Kyler Murray, Chuba Hubbard, Rico Dowdle, Chase Brown, Jamar Chase, Brian Thomas Jr., Elijah Moore, Stone Smart, Browns defense. Then on FanDuel, my dummy lineup heading into Sunday was Jaden Daniels, Derrick Henry, Chuba Hubbard, Zach Charbonnet, because you get the Sunday night game, Hunter Henry, Calvin Ridley, Elijah Moore, Cortland Sutton, Ravens defense. And I switched the FanDuel lineup because I just don't, when given the choice, I just don't play Derrick Henry when given the choice, because he's just so dependent on touchdowns, even though FanDuel is more touchdown oriented. And I wasn't necessarily the fact that I'm paying up at quarterback and not getting Josh Allen and playing Jaden Daniels at 8,700 instead of Josh Allen at 9,500, I thought was kind of stupid. I thought about going down from the Ravens defense to some lower defense or something in order to do that, and I'm like, you know what? The guy that I really want to play on DraftKings is James Conner.
Yes.
Like I wanted to play James Conner. Like that was the running back I wanted to play. FanDuel, he was 7,900. So he was kind of out of the question compared to Chase Brown on FanDuel, but it was a $600 difference on DraftKings. So I'm like, let me switch this to Josh Allen, Chase Brown on FanDuel. So I'm like, okay. So now I don't mind playing Chase Brown on FanDuel. I wanted to play Chase Brown on FanDuel. I like Chase Brown, right? So I'm like, okay, I got that. Well, now I'm playing Chase Brown on both sides, and I think Dowdle and Hubbard were like, they were staples of my cash lineup on DraftKings. So it's like, okay, I guess if I'm already playing Jamar Chase and I'm getting my Bengals exposure anyway, so I'm going to go from Chase Brown down to James Conner and then go up from the Browns defense to the Cardinals defense, because I wasn't necessarily even convinced that the Browns defense is, 2,200, but easily potential against Mahomes, for a donut, for or a 1 point, 2 points. Like I didn't feel as if the Browns defense was going to put up 18 points and kill me in cash games when they're facing Patrick Mahomes. Right. So it's like, okay, I'll switch it there. And because I didn't want to have like Chase Brown on both sides, and I had Elijah Moore in both my lineups, I try to keep things as diversified as possible, and ends up both choices ended up working out correctly on both sides. My lineup with Allen and Chase Brown was actually a bit of a train on FanDuel, so that was good. And then my lineup of DraftKings scored, 13, 14 points higher than the other one and easily cashed in all my double ups. Even though, I say double ups and stuff like that on both sides, but I play a lot of head-to-heads.
Right.
So it's not just, it's the DraftKings, I play 80% head-to-heads. FanDuel, I play 80% double ups and 50-50s because they post more of those. But yeah, that was it. Although on DraftKings, had there been no injury question or potential, I thought he was going to play, but maybe he was going to be limited. Maybe he wasn't going to be as good. I was going to play Glad McConkey at 6,300 on DraftKings. The combination I wanted to play on DraftKings was T. Higgins plus Lad McConkey plus Brian Thomas Jr. Like that,
Sure.
that would have been, I wouldn't have been able to get Connor then, right? I would have played Chase. I probably would have played Chase Brown in that lineup, which still would have been fine. But that's the stuff I kind of did in GPP. And if it's the year 2024, I know we'll get into GPP stuff, but if it's the year 2024 and Adam Thielen is 22% owned, you probably should find a way to pivot away from that.
Yeah, this was I thought this was a hard week in cash. I noted, I don't usually put a note in the cash game core that I write on the site, but if you have read my thoughts and notes for subscribers over on the site, I include a cash and a GPP core at the bottom. And the cash core that I built out, usually it's all but two of the players. So it's as close to plug and play as you can get. But this week I had Kyler Murray at quarterback, Chuba Hubbard, James Conner, Jamar Chase, Elijah Moore, Stone Smart, and the Browns defense. And I write this for DraftKings. So I thought that was fine, but I did note that it was kind of a hard week. I didn't really feel super strong about Elijah Moore. I didn't feel super strong about...
Hold on. On FanDuel, he was 4,700.
Yeah, on FanDuel, he was free.
FanDuel, the difference, like FanDuel, I didn't want to play Elijah Moore on DraftKings. That's the real question came into me. If Jamar Chase at 8,400 is going to be popular, he's the guy that could totally kill me. Like he's the guy that could put up 40 points and I'm dead. So it's like, if there's a way for me to fit him in, the fact that I'm not playing Lad McConkey, so that knocks out one of those mid-range receivers, there was a way to do a combination. Instead of playing Chase, you played Higgins and Sutton.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, if I'm going to play a Bengal, I'm going to play Chase. I was already playing Sutton on FanDuel, so Sutton was out of the question on DraftKings. But for the most part, I will play high-owned plays on purpose if they're the types of people that have ceilings to have, if they're path to kill, and they're like a receiver or a cheaper running back, right? Derrick Henry, I know, has a ceiling. And I know on FanDuel in my 50-50s, he was like 65% owned.
Yeah.
But those are the types of players that, could they kill me with multiple touchdowns? I'm talking about guys that catch like 8 balls out of the backfield. And, guys like fading Zach Charbonnet last week at 4,800, like that type of stuff. Like you just don't do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I thought on Elijah Moore, I did note also in the article, and I have the article up on the screen right now, but I did note, I go over kind of the who's going to be the highest projected owned on each site, and I said on FanDuel that we'd see Elijah Moore he was projected for 20% owned. I thought he would be higher at 4,700. I figured he was going to be higher. I thought he was going to be higher on both sites because he was kind of like a nice value play that has worked out in the past. So I thought he was going to be higher. But the cash game core I thought was a little bit hard. I think that it was really smart to get off of Derrick Henry. And some people I think would say that that's...
play Derrick Henry in double ups?
Not on DraftKings, on FanDuel.
Okay, I don't think on DraftKings.
Yeah, no. On DraftKings, he wasn't even really in the question. It was you're going to play Chuba Hubbard, James Conner, Chase Brown, or
Rico Dowdle.
Yeah, Rico Dowdell. Those were kind of the guys that you were going to play. And then obviously on FanDuel, you also had Zach Charbonnet, which did not work out, but I thought that he was a clear play that you were going to make. But the Derrick Henry thing,
he worked out in the fact that he scored more points than Chuba Hubbard. So I mean, he scored 13 points.
Yeah, he was fine. He didn't crush. To to what people would have expected of him. But he was fine. The Derrick Henry thing, though, I think that people would like try to push back and be like, oh, well, he gets great volume and they were huge favorites and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, okay, that's fair. And the expectation would be that he would crush, but there's an opportunity cost. And when you have Chuba Hubbard, James Conner, Rico Dowdell, Chase Brown, and on FanDuel, especially Zach Charbonnet, like there's just too many running backs to spend all your salary at running back. You have all these mid-range options that are going to be perfectly fine. They have good touchdown equity. Like all those guys that I just mentioned have good touchdown equity. They have good rushing share attempt equity. Like you didn't need to dedicate a lot of your salary to Derrick Henry in cash games on FanDuel. I played in my Wildcat lineup, I played Derrick Henry. And then in my Millie Maker lineup, I played Lamar Jackson. And I thought that was a good split. I did best on underdog this week, where I jammed 75 quick drafts with a little new strategy that I had. I did have a sweat if I had Saquon Barkley be able to do anything, but Saquon Barkley was not able to do anything, so life is hard. But I did much better on underdog than I did on either side. I almost min cash because I game stacked the hell out of that Detroit Buffalo game, which I was surprised was so low owned. We talked about it a lot on the Slate talk about we have a game here where Josh Allen went nuclear last week. It was a late hammer again. Detroit has been scoring more points than anyone else in the league. They just run up the points whenever they can. It was accessible. It was at home in a dome for Jared Goff. Like it was kind of like the perfect storm situation. And yet people would rather play Adam Thielen over Jameson Williams. People would rather play like all of these guys. The highest owned wide receiver in that game was Amari Cooper, who put up 0 fantasy points, which, by the way, absolutely fucking incredible to put up 0 fantasy points and have 0 yards. And I think he had 0 targets. I think he literally didn't have a role.
He barely played.
That's fucking bonkers. I'm flabbergasted by that. I don't understand. Has it come out that he was injured? Like,
I don't care. I didn't play him. I didn't think it 16% own. What are people doing? Not at
5,300 in a game total with 55 with 2 of the best offenses in the NFL. He should have been like 30.
I wasn't on Buffalo at all because Josh Allen, sure, but I mean, who knows what he connects with 17 people. He's the only one that scores 50 points, and no one else does well. So, if you played that game, if you played Jared Goff, God bless you. Okay, great, whatever. You didn't necessarily even need him. There were paths to get there without that game. My in GPP, the ownership on some things surprised me. Okay, some things didn't, but this was the slate where it surprised me. I mean, recent memory. This is a slate that surprised me a lot.
So let's go over that. Do you want to start with quarterbacks or do you just want to start overall?
I just want to start overall. Okay. The one that I got right, ownership wise, and I said on my Friday show on Roto Grinders, I thought Brian Robinson would end up being the sneaky play that ends up going over owned.
Sure.
Right. Quote, I don't want to call him a sneaky play. He was just out of the range of, like, if you're not playing Hubbard or Dowdle, you're going to play Brian Robinson with the Commanders, significant favorites over the Saints in the Superdome. So he was projected at like 12% owned, and he came in at 23. So like I played Brian Robinson in 2 lineups. So I mean, it's not like I didn't play him, but I thought that he wasn't going to be leverage in the running back position. It turned out that the leverage was with James Conner at 15%. He probably should have been 20% owned. Chase Brown was under owned. The most surprising thing to me about this slate was, one, that Miami was the highest owned stack.
Yeah.
Which I played 1-2 a stack. Because I thought no one was going to play the Dolphins. I had the Dolphins as all single digit owned. 2 of being like not even in the top 10 of quarterbacks and projected ownership. And then they come in at Tyreek. I look at the team and I go, what the hell? Who pumped this? Tyreek Hill 16%, Jalen Waddle's 13%, Tua 13%, Jonnu 5%. I'm like, what happened there? And the team that I thought was going to be over-owned ended up being under-owned. And that's the Bengals. Yeah. I played a Burrow stack. I played Burrow, Chase, and Higgins. I mean, all these guys, Chase, Higgins, and Brown, were all projection. If you were using any type of projection set, like there were some cash lineups where you're playing three of these guys, where you legitimately are playing all three of the skill position players. So I'm like, yeah, this is going to go over-owned, especially when you plug in some expensive players. Then you get Stone Smart in your lineup. You get Brenton Strange. You get these little 2 tight end lineups with Dalton Schultz run backs and the Browns defense. I'm like, it's going to be very hard to be different with the Bengals stack. And they're going to be over-owned. And they're all under-owned. I mean, they're all like significantly under-owned. Jamar Chase, to me, should have been the high-priced wide receiver that was 25% owned. Chase Brown at 7,200 should have been the third highest owned, should have been higher owned than Brian Robinson and James Conner and all these guys. And T. Higgins at 7.8%. Like, I thought T. Higgins should have been like 18% owned. Yeah. So when the cards flipped over and I saw that the Bengals were like this, I'm like, where did I go wrong? I was purposely not playing Bengals like in other than Chase Brown. I was purposely not playing a Chase one-off or a Higgins one-off because I just thought that if they get there, like the Burrow stack wins. Yeah. So I'm just not going to bother. I have some wide receivers that I played at low ownership that differentiated me. 2 did extremely well, and 1 not so much so. But yeah, the most surprising. I mean, I wouldn't have never thought the Dolphins would have been higher owned than the Bengals. If you told me yesterday the Dolphins are going to be higher owned than the Bengals, I would have thought you were nuts. I would have bet 500. I would have bet $500 with you, James, and said, if you think that's happening, I mean, I don't know what you're listening to. What, like voodoo? Are the drones? Are there drones in the sky with mind control telling people to play the Dolphins? I do not get why Tua was the highest owned quarterback in the Millie, like by far. Yeah. I mean, I knew the Cardinals were going to be chalky, so I mean, I knew Kyler Murray was going to be there, but I mean, even the Cardinals weren't even that owned, right? Marvin Harrison 12%, Trey McBride 11%, James Conner 15%. Like, what happened?
So I theorized on the Slate Talk and later on in my article, I had said that I thought Detroit was going to get steamed up because I couldn't understand how nobody was on Detroit. I couldn't understand. I did not understand how people were just passing up a 55 total game in a dome. So I was like, okay, I know that Cincinnati projects highly. I think that ownership's going to go to Detroit. And I was right that Cincinnati was the team that people got off of. I was not right about where it fucking went. We liked the Miami-Houston environment, and I thought the Miami stacks made sense, but didn't expect them to come in 15% owned. And I don't. This is the second week in a row now where we had a quarterback just get jammed into the top seemingly out of nowhere. I mean, I understand last week when we talked about it, AOC came in at higher ownership because both Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers were high owned. Sure, fine, but we projected Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers to be high owned. And in this,
they were good projected. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle did not have they were not from a salary adjusted value standpoint, but there were tons of other wide receivers and that were in their own range at 5,700 and at in the 7K range.
Yeah.
I mean, there were receivers that were, there were receivers in the 6Ks that projected higher than Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
At 7K. Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
Jerry Jeudy
even Mike Evans actually projected higher than Tyreek Hill on the exact same slate.
I'm pretty sure that Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton both projected better than Tyreek Hill across the industry. I know I had them projected better than Tyreek Hill. I think Brian Thomas Jr. projected better than Tyreek Hill across the industry.
Well,
Might be wrong on that.
You're naming the wide receivers that I played that I was surprised to get at such low ownership.
Yeah.
I didn't go up 1,000 enough. Basically, the key is that as one-offs, because I want to play like wide receiver one-offs from teams that aren't being stacked, so I don't lose to the stack.
Yeah.
So the wide receivers, the running backs. I mean, I didn't go off the board at all. I mean, essentially, I played a lot of Connor, right?
Sure.
That was my quote off the board. But I played a lot of Chase Brown, James Conner. Unfortunately, Chuba Hubbard lineups. Where Chuba Hubbard was in some of my best lineups. But the wide receivers that I chose to differentiate with outside of the stacks. Now, obviously, if I would have went up 1,000, I would have gotten Devontae Adams or Mike Evans or Terry McLaurin or whatever. I was looking in the 5K range, and one was Brian Thomas Jr. I played him in DK Cash. I'm surprised he came in at 8% owned. I mean, I thought he was going to be 15% owned. He came in at, I would have played Brian Thomas in like almost all my lineups had I known he was 8% owned.
Yeah.
Another one I played as a one-off was Jerry Jeudy. It's at 6,200. He ended up 12.9% owned, which is about what I expected. I just thought more people were going to play Elijah Moore for no reason. And Jerry Jeudy had like a 72-yard receiving prop at this price. And like, it's Jameis Winston throwing the ball. I mean, he's going to chuck it. The other one was that I played Zay Flowers at 6,000.
Sure.
Being that Derrick Henry was going to be owned and barely anyone's playing Lamar. So I'm going to play Zay Flowers. Turns out I should have played Rashad Bateman, but that's a different story. And the other one, I didn't care about his status. I thought Vlad McConkey at 6,300 was an excellent play in a game that I thought the Chargers were going to have to throw the ball a ton. He was 8.7% owned at 6,300. I think he should. Had he been completely healthy and no risk of injury or anything, he probably would have been 20% owned. So I'm just going to play him as if that's what he should be owned. Yeah. And I played him. I played Justin. Basically, my stacks were Jaden Daniels, Tua, Stroud, Burrow, Kyler, and Herbert. And my red zone lineup, the one that I put more volume in, I played a Herbert McConkey Smart stack with Brian Thomas. I believe I had Brian Thomas Jr. or Jerry Jeudy in that lineup. I mean, that was a good lineup, other than Chuba Hubbard was in that lineup with Chase Brown and James Conner. James Conner, Cardinals defense. So I think I 4X'd or 5X'd that lineup, and that's why I made money in GPP this week. But yeah, I mean, but some of this ownership. But you tell me beforehand that the Bengals were going to be this owned. I would have. I mean, I did play a Burrow stack, but I didn't realize in my Burrow stack that I didn't have to get like leverage elsewhere. Yeah, like, that was the key. Like the Tua lineup, I'm like, oh, I'm going to play Tua. I'm going to play Tua, Waddle, Jonnu Smith, and this lineup I could just jam the chalk in the rest of my lineup because who's playing these guys?
Yeah, it was rough. And I mean, again, like we'll talk about it when we go and talk about wide receivers overall. But you can see based on ownership and based on results, you probably shouldn't have played the chalky wide receivers. My main focus and what I wrote up in the article was that I really wanted to focus on, I had Jared Goff, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels as main quarterbacks. And then for wide receivers, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Amari Cooper, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and CeeDee Lamb. I hit on a lot of those really like solid plays. The one play that I was off of for the most part was Chuba Hubbard. And that what I posted over on Twitter, I was trying to pontificate on how people would look at a 40% owned projected Chuba Hubbard and whether that would be a reality and he would come in at 40% owned, or if people would recognize that he probably shouldn't be 40% owned and he would come down to like 25% owned. I thought that his efficient ownership was somewhere around 20%. And him coming in at 30, I just thought that he was kind of a lame duck play. Now, I did think that he was fine in lineups where you didn't need any extra leverage. To your point, on something like Cincinnati. I said, don't play him. It's funny. I said, don't play him in Detroit stacks because I think Detroit stacks are going to come in way higher owned, when really you probably should have played him in Detroit stacks because they came in way lower owned than they should have been. But I
you
thought
should have said don't play him in Dolphin stacks, and people will look at you and say, what are you talking about?
Well, no, I should have I said not to play him in Cincinnati or Detroit stacks.
Right.
And here we are. You should have played him in both of those because you could have gained a lot of leverage. Just from your stacks. I thought that it was, I agree with you. I thought that it was a little bit of a weird week from a how did people end up in these positions? I don't know if it has anything to do with like the live finals or something. Like maybe there was there less content? Was there more content? I don't know. But it's really weird to see the entire industry basically being off of Miami from a projected ownership standpoint. I did hear some people talk about it, but I heard more people talking about Jets stacks, which crushed, than I did Miami stacks. And somehow Miami stacks came in 3 times higher than Jet stacks. So I don't know where that ownership came from.
And the most popular combination of 2 players, team stack wise, in the Millie was Chuba Hubbard and Adam Thielen. 5.3% of the entire field played a lineup with both of them. And yeah, they're the Carolina Panthers, people. I'm sorry.
You know what else is crazy about the Panthers situation? Rico Dowdell and Chuba Hubbard were the 2 highest owned players on the slate, at like 31 and 30% owned. But they had basically no overlap in lineups, meaning that like 60% of the field understood not to play these guys together and just play them as hedges against each other. That's kind of funny. We don't see that very often. 2 running backs going against each other, taking up that much of the field. That's pretty interesting.
No, I mean, you have to go through. I mean, you have to add up all the numbers on this game stacks page. So Chuba Hubbard, Rico Dowdle, 4.8% together. But then you have to go Chuba Hubbard, Rico Dowdle, Adam Thielen was 1.5% together. You have to add that. It's not just Chuba Hubbard, Rico Dowdle. It's the exact right. This is the way that it's done on Results DB. So you'd have to go and find them both together in all these different combinations. Even if they're listed, they'll sometimes be listed, like you'll see here, they'll listed Rico Dowdle, Chuba Hubbard, right? 0.8%, depending on if this is like for how the database picks this up, is that this obviously means that one of these guys ended up in the flex, Chuba Hubbard in the flex, so it counted Rico Dowdle first. So it's not just, it's a little flaw in Results DB.
Yeah,
it doesn't just show that.
Bryce Young and Adam Thielen lineups 1%. People were gung ho about the Panthers, man.
Probably shouldn't have been.
Probably shouldn't have been. Let's go ahead and talk through some of these ownerships. So let's start with quarterbacks. Tua, we already talked about the elephant in the room here. Tua ending up the highest owned quarterback in the Millie is just insane to me. That completely out of nowhere. I thought it was going to be Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert, and then I thought that we were going to see steam on Jared Goff. I thought Jared Goff was going to pick up some ownership. I also thought that Aaron Rodgers was going to pick up ownership. I had Aaron Rodgers projected for like 3% ownership. He came in at 6%, so I was right about that. But I thought we were going to see more ownership on Jared Goff. We saw way less ownership on Justin Herbert, which I guess all of that ownership went straight to Tua. And the other thing that I was actually surprised by was Josh Allen at 10%. I thought that as much as I thought that it wasn't impossible to get to him, you did have to make some concessions to make it happen. And I thought that people would be much more likely to go to the Jared Goff side, playing at home with more consistent wide receiver market shares, stuff like that. And people just said, fuck it. This went full send on Josh Allen at 10% and obviously got paid for it, 45 fantasy points. So outside of the 201, is there anything here that you didn't see coming or that you thought was under-owned?
Well, I based on the lineups that I played, I mean, I probably should have played a 0.4% on Mac Jones.
Yeah,
If I was
you
so
like
high, if I was so high on Brian Thomas Jr., you had the cheap tight end there with Brenton Strange and Devontae Adams as a run back. I'm like, why didn't I end up doing? Why didn't I play that type of lineup? Because I have no problem doing that.
And 4,900, man, it's free.
Right, 4,900, 0.4% owned. I mean, another quarterback I wouldn't have minded playing at 1.2% ownership. I don't care if it's a bad matchup. Is Anthony Richardson at 5,800? Just that you would have to do it naked. But no. Other than that, I think the ownership. I mean, Lamar came in higher than I thought at 5%. Jaden Daniels came in at 6%. I thought these guys would be barely owned. I mean, it turns out Jalen Hurts was out of the bunch, the one that was going to be the 8% owned, and he put up 29 points.
And it didn't even.
But I wasn't going to play Jalen Hurts.
It's funny that Jalen Hurts putting up 30 fantasy points at 1% owned. You're just like, oh, well, whatever. It doesn't fucking matter because there were like 6 quarterbacks that put up 30 plus this week.
Right.
Baker Mayfield at 1.3% owned. I had a lot of fucking Kate Otten on Underdog, which it's because he was free and he was like, when you auto draft, it basically default with your last pick. It defaults to whoever the highest is of your rankings or whatever. And the way that I had things ranked out, I guess Kate Otten was just the highest there. Lesson learned on that. But I really liked Mike Evans, and I thought Baker Mayfield was probably an okay play. Let's move on to running backs here. Running backs a little bit more interesting. So obviously Hubbard at 37%. I had him projected about 31. 37 is completely reasonable. I was surprised. I thought that people would look at him, especially with Dowdell being cheaper. I thought that people would look at Hubbard and think that he was not necessary. It turns out what people did was just say, oh, I'm going to jam Brian Robinson in and Derrick Henry. I did not have Derrick Henry projected that highly owned.
I mean, not on DraftKings. I thought Derrick Henry would be like 10, 12% owned or something. I thought Joe Mixon would be higher owned than Derrick Henry.
I did too. Yeah, I thought that it was going to be Joe Mixon.
I definitely did not have Chase Brown at only 14.8% owned.
No, I had him at like 22 or something like that. Like James Conner, Rico Dowdell, Chuba Hubbard, and Chase Brown. Like you said, I thought those were going to be the 4 highest owned running backs. I did think when I ran contest sims, and I posted this over in the article too. I post some undervalued guys from the contest sims. Brian Robinson Jr., I had him projected for 14%. His efficient ownership was 22% in the contest sim. So he came in where I expected him to where he should have came in. Chase Brown, I had him projected at 20%. I had his efficient ownership at 26%, and he comes in at 14%. It's like, fuck, I should have jammed that. Because if I'd have known that he was going to be 14% owned, he has the highest edge on the slate, of any flex position player. That went to Jerry Jeudy, who I had with an efficient ownership of 21%. But from a running back standpoint, these ownerships are just crazy. I also thought that if you weren't going to be on that Detroit Buffalo game, I really thought you should have given a good look to Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, who were a little bit expensive, but obviously low owned. David Montgomery at 7.5%, Jahmyr Gibbs at 12%. I thought made sense, but I thought he was a really, really good play at 7,500.
I don't think the industry in general projected James Conner well.
I don't think so either.
I think Amari DiMercato is out. And did people not realize this is, I know it's coming from me, and I know the take coming from me.
Right.
Because on DraftKings, I care more about not just, rushing. I care about catching the ball out of the backfield because, PPR scoring versus FanDuel, which you only get half a point. So that's why, anyone like Chase Brown, he's going to 85% of snaps and catch balls out of the backfield. He's 7,200. Come on. These are the guys that you want to play on DraftKings. Brian Robinson ain't doing that, right? Rico Dowdle ain't doing that either. James Conner, without DiMercato, plays third downs and plays the 2-minute drill. Benson doesn't. you take DeMarcado out, Connor plays all of that. So like Connor ends up becoming the same role as Chase Brown, essentially the same role as Chase Brown for a team that has a 26-point implied team total. That instead of having 2 or 3 targets out of the backfield, he's much more likely to have 5 or 6 targets out of the backfield and be on the field for an extra 5 to 7 snaps. So, like, to me, I view James Conner and Chase Brown to be essentially, they should have projected about the same to each other, and one is 600 cheaper. So I know plenty of sites had Conner projected well, but Brown better. But yeah. I thought it was much closer than it should have been, based on the fact that DeMarcado was going to be out and Benson was not going to play. You know, Benson is not going to play the same role as that. James Conner would possibly be out there for 90 to 95% of the snaps in this game. So to me, Conner was at 15% on was. I mean, Chase Brown obviously at 14% on also. I thought these two guys were the 2 best running back plays on the entire slate at their ownerships.
Yeah, I had James Conner project for 19 and Chase Brown project for 21. So I was a little bit low if you're making that comparison. But I agree. I think that James Conner's role without DeMarcado, and especially, you know, at home as a big favorite with a good team total and in a good matchup for running backs. Like
I also liked him James. I also liked him in GPP because I thought Kyler Murray was going to be too high owned.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
So it's a Murray, Harrison, McBride lineup. So it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to play a lot of James Conner.
Yeah, he was really good. And Chase Brown is the same thing, right? And that same thought. If you thought that Cincinnati was going to be overowned, then you love Chase Brown because, and it turned out Chase Brown and Bengals stacks were underowned, which is hilarious.
Dude, I would have played Bengals in every lineup had I known that the owners. I mean, I wouldn't have gotten there. I mean, I would have cashed the lineups. I mean, they wouldn't have, won me.
They wouldn't have won anything.
Right. But if I had looking at this and seeing what the projections were, it's like, dude, I would have gotten Bengals in like every lineup.
Yeah. Yeah. Brutal run out on that. The only other play that I wanted to mention here is Breece Hall. I thought that Breece Hall, after he was announced was a really interesting pivot off of Chuba Hubbard. He did end up scoring more fantasy points than Chuba Hubbard. It didn't matter. He only scored 13. But I thought that he was a really interesting pivot off of him. Jacksonville, while everybody attacks them for their passing game upside for teams against Jacksonville, their defense against running backs is just as bad. And Breece Hall, when he has been healthy and on the field, has had a really, really good role for the Jets. He's had really, really good receiving work. So I thought that he was a really interesting play, especially at 3% owned. I thought that he was a pretty cool play. So
can I say something about running backs? This is not to do with DFS.
Yeah, of course.
I love people's best ball tiers. I love the boomer robust running back best ball tiers when the 0 RBers are the ones that actually get that the entire year. I know I don't play best ball or season long, but I'm pretty sure. I mean, obviously I follow tons of people on Twitter anyway. I guarantee you, if you were in a season long fantasy league, a serious one or something like that, the Barkley Henry drafters, non-CMC, if you were someone that took wide receivers the first 2 or 3 rounds and waited and you picked up, these 0 RB candidates and the crap running backs, you probably were getting dunked on the entire year. Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, people taking them in the first round, or mid-first round running back shit. When the playoff comes around, which is week 15, and both those guys have less than single-digit points, and the winners were Chase Brown and Rico Dowdle, the 0 RB guys. I want to say, just flip the bird.
It's every
obviously if I play best ball season long, I'd totally be a 0 RB type of drafter.
You would, and you would win because of it. It's every single year, man. Like every single year.
People will be making fun of me with Justin Jefferson. Oh, he only gets 20 points. He only gets 20 points. It only gets 20 points. I'd barely make the playoffs, and then I'd have Chase Brown and Rico Dowdle on my team and crush people.
Yeah. and Brian Robinson and Chuba Hubbard. Like you'd have
right. You'd have these guys, and the Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley teams would be like, "What happened here?" In beautiful matchups.
Yeah, in terrific matchups.
Right.
I'm gonna. So one of the big pushes for Pater next year is gonna be best ball, and we're putting together some algorithms for it right now, and I cannot wait because everybody always puts together their best ball stuff to like match each other. The entire industry is just incestuous. Like they all just hang out together and say, this is what people should be worth. And then that's what drives the market. And then the market is just a whole bunch of guys agreeing with each other. It's like that meme of like two dumb bitches saying, yes, queen. Like that's the entire best ball industry. It's just people agreeing with each other. And I cannot wait to be entirely different and be laughed off the face of the earth. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited to build out the models for that. But you're right. Best ball season long, all that kind of stuff. Everybody has their day in the sun, scores a whole bunch of points, and then you end up in the playoffs, and it's like, all right, well, the people who actually drafted in a way that mathematically makes sense, they end up winning because that's what they do.
I mean, that's not the thesis of the play. That's it being disingenuous. You do that because so many injuries happen at running back that the spend draft.
Okay, so I should not have said mathematically. Maybe that wasn't the right way to put it. But when you take into account the injury variance that happens to running backs in NFL, that's what I meant.
Like right, but Barkley and Henry didn't get injured. They just had really bad games in week 15.
Right. So
the teams that had them did great all year, got to the playoffs and lost.
Unless they also drafted Chase Brown and Rico Dowdell.
Most likely those teams don't have those players on. They wouldn't.
Which is surprising. I would think that would be surprising. But people don't give a shit about our best ball takes. People only listen to Davis Maddock about that shit. We'll move on to wide receivers. Adam Thielen at 22% owned. What are we doing here, people? Like, what are we doing?
The highest owned wide receivers. The two highest wide receivers in the millie were Adam Thielen and Amari Cooper. And then next was Tyreek Hill. And if you would have told me that on Saturday, Sunday morning, you said, okay, highest owned wide receivers, Thielen, Cooper, and Hill. I go, what? What? Did you just randomly pick three people out of a hat? Like, what are you talking about? I knew Thielen was going to be owned. I knew, it projected well, 5,400. Good median play. I get it. I totally get it. If he was 15% owned, I'd be like, okay, that's fine. Amari Cooper at 16% owned. Like, where did that? I'm like, okay, Steam or whatever, 6-7%. Tyreek Hill, 6-7%. Like, why is Jalen Waddle the sixth highest owned wide receiver on the slate? Like, I get Marvin Harrison because of Kyler Murray. I get Jamar Chase. I thought Chase would be the highest owned wide receiver. I get Cortland Sutton at 6,600. Right, I get some of these guys. I even get Khalil Shakir if you want to play Josh Allen or something like that. I get Amon-Ra St. Brown. I even get Devontae Adams, right? I get Calvin Ridley at 5,900. I get these things, but why the wide? I mean, if you take a look at the 1% finishes, like if you played any of the wide receivers, you got screwed because good thing is that I really didn't play these guys. Right, I played a Dolphin stack, sure, yeah, but that's one of them.
I just can't fathom why people want to tie themselves to Bryce Young and this Panthers team. I don't.
I think he was fine, not at 22%, not being the highest owned wide receiver.
He wasn't. It goes back to your point of upside, and like if he's, I had Adam Thielen projected, I think, for something like 14% owned.
You're telling me he can't catch 12 balls for 118 yards and 3 touchdowns? I mean, he has to catch
I do not think that is anywhere close to like within one standard deviation for a Panthers wide receiver. I don't. If you look, the Panthers this year are kind of peak Daniel Jones with the Giants. Okay. And peak Daniel Jones is a funny thing to say, but it's true. The best wide receiver for the Panthers any given week might have a stat line. This is what I think is like a ceiling outcome for the Panthers most weeks. 7 catches for 70 yards and a touchdown. That is peak for anyone. That's what I think Adam Thielen's ceiling was this week. And that ceiling at 5,400 is not worth its fucking salt. and especially not at 2,200. There were enough plays on this slate and enough mid-range values on this slate that you did not need to tie yourself to a Panthers team with a low team total in a spot where everybody is jamming in Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdell on the other side. Like that game environment, when looking at the game environments on this slate, shouldn't have even been in people's minds from a wide receiver standpoint. You had Brian Thomas Jr., you had Jerry Jeudy, you had Cortland Sutton, you had T. Higgins at 6,800. You had Terry McLaurin. You had the Detroit and Buffalo game. You had Tampa Bay, who is in a good spot and still has a really skinny target tree. Like, the Panthers probably were like the 10th best spot. But I would rather play Malik Neighbors or Wan'Dale Robinson on the Giants in a trailing game script against the Ravens, who, by the way, people have been attacking with wide receivers for like half the season. I'd rather play those guys over an Adam Thielen in a spot where, like, it's just a fucking nothing burger. People look at a median projection and they think to themselves, that median projection looks pretty good for the price. But they don't think about anything after that. And that's how we end up with Adam Thielen at 22% owned when you had no less than 20 wide receivers that were probably better plays than Adam Thielen.
Okay, 22% owned. Can you say the same thing for Amari Cooper?
Okay, so I think that you could probably say a lot of the same things for Amari Cooper, but Amari Cooper came in
a different regard. Like Adam Thielen, his range of outcomes. So, like, if his median projection is this, like his range of outcomes is like this. It's like very normal and very condensed. So it's like, okay, if Adam Thielen puts up 10 points, okay. If he puts up 3 points, you'd be like, yeah, that's a really weird for him to only put up 3 points.
Right.
And for him to put up 33 points, you'd be like, that's really weird. But can he get you 10 to 15 points? No problem. A-okay. Range of outcomes.
It's that meme of like, if you need 10 fantasy points, Adam Thielen will get you 10 fantasy points. If you need 20 fantasy points, Adam Thielen will get you 10 fantasy points. Like that's what he does.
Right. But anyway, Amari Cooper is the opposite. Amari Cooper is the median is very similar to Adam Thielen's, other than he never scores 10 fantasy points. He either scores 0 or 30. So, and people treated that median as if like, oh, well, Amari Cooper's back for the Bills, even though Josh Allen throws to 14 people, and when he doesn't have someone open, he just runs it himself, right? So, like good luck figuring out who to stack Josh Allen with. Apparently, people wanted to play Amari Cooper at 5,300, and that would have been fine. If you told me you wanted to take a shot on a 3% on Amari Cooper, I would be like, okay. I mean, you take a shot, you live and learn, and whatever. When he's the second highest owned wide receiver, I think that's insane.
Yeah. I didn't think he was going to be the second highest owned wide receiver. Shout out to Pablo. He did say that he was going to get steamed up, and I thought he would get steamed up. I thought he would be between 5 and 10% still, and I was fine with him at 5 to 10%. 16% owned, and the second highest owned wide receiver to Adam fucking Thielen. I would not have been as happy about playing Amari Cooper there.
He was 21% owned in the live final.
He was a good play. But
here's the live final, 200 entries. Now we get ownership that makes sense. Jamar Chase, 27% owned, highest owned wide receiver.
Yep.
Brian Thomas, 24% owned in the live final. T. Higgins, 19% owned. Adam Thielen was only 13% owned.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And then we look at quarterback. Still Tua, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow. Running back, Hubbard was 55. Then Connor was 32. Then Dowdle. Brown was 24. Robinson 24. Henry 19. Mixon 13. Tight ends, basically the cheap tight ends. Mm-hmm. And the Baltimore and Cleveland, as you know, I look at the live final ownership, and this is more of the ownership that I would have expected, or at least closer to it. But of course, if you're in a live final, you're probably not that bad. So
no, those are the better players.
Because even I take a look at the Wildcat, and the Wildcat, I mean, James Conner and Chase Brown were both 27 and 24% owned, higher than Brian Robinson. Kyler Murray was look. Kyler Murray and Justin Herbert were the two highest owned quarterbacks, 15 and 11. Tua was 10, Allen was 9. Wide receiver wise, Chase was 20, Brian Thomas was 20, then Amari Cooper at 16, then Sutton, then Harrison, then Thielen at 15, Tyreek at 14, Lad McConkey 14. Tight end is whatever the hell it is, and we get Cleveland and Baltimore and stuff like that.
This is a perfect representation of why the field size and the field strength matters.
Why do you think we go back to right earlier in this show? Who are the two guys that I'm like, I want to play in cash and I want to jam? Brian Thomas Jr. and James Conner. And then you go and you go and you look at the Millie ownership and you go, why are these guys way lower owned than they should be? And then I go to the high stakes stuff and they're like, oh, that's the ownership they should have been. Yeah. And they're not. So
there you go.
Low stakes, the large field like this highlights a lot of the fact that and people don't get it. That when it seems odd because you'll hear other people say otherwise. This is what you'll hear, James. You'll hear people say, well, in large field contests, you want to get different, right? So like, oh, if you want to play a Mac Jones lineup, if you want to play whatever, if you want to play Malik Neighbors, right? Play that in the large field stuff because you want to be able to beat 147,000 entries. You're playing like a small field contest, like the live final of 200. It's like you don't want to play any of those guys. You want to basically play chalk and you need one spot different, which in a vacuum makes sense. The concept of the field size mattering to that. But what I always say is that it's about over-owned and under-owned. And it's dependent on the opponents that you're playing. So when I say this sentence, sometimes it doesn't resonate. I tend to get more different in smaller field contests than I do in larger field contests. Now, that's still with the heuristic of larger field contests. You don't want to play your fucking cash lineup. But in larger field contests, when Brian Thomas Jr. is 7.8% owned, like he's under owned, you should be just Connor and these guys. Like I look at my lineups in large field contests and go, I'm just going to play the guys that are under owned, despite the fact that they shouldn't be, because people are playing. I go to the Millie and people are like playing 2% owned. You know, Jordan Akins is 6% owned, and I could just go through and see like the ownership on some of these 4%. Why is 8% owned Nick Westbrook-Akine? And we get we get Isaiah Pacheco at 3% owned and Devon Vele at 3% owned. Like all these guys add up to stuff that makes the and then what ends up happening is like Chuba Hubbard gets 7 million % owned. So everyone has to jam. And Adam Thielen gets to be zillion% owned. It's like just play your Bengals stack with Brian Thomas Jr. and James Conner. No matter if you're like, well, this shouldn't really be too high owned. But in large field, it won't be owned enough. But in small field, then it will be too owned. And that's where you're much more likely to go, I'm going to drop 5 points in projection and then just play whatever combinatorically is actually different than most lineups. Doesn't mean I don't play chalk, just that maybe I'm not. If I see a lot of lineups have like Brian Robinson plus Chuba Hubbard,
right?
Like in it, like I just don't play them together. And then I don't play Stones. Like I take like the top owned guys, and I'm like, I at max want to play 2 of these guys together, or one of them. Like I have to choose between Hubbard, Dowdle, Smart, and Brian Robinson, and I can only play one of them. So if I'm playing Chuba Hubbard, that means I'm not playing Dowdle. I'm playing Brenton Strange at tight end instead of Stone Smart. I'm playing James Conner, and where there'll be plenty of Conner lineups, there'll be plenty of Dowdle lineups, there'll be plenty of Robinson and Hubbard lineups, but not ones that have this configuration in it. And that's the reason why it projects 5 points lower. But there's a big difference between it projects 5 points lower, and all I'm doing is taking it. Let's say I play my cash lineup, and I say, well, instead of playing Elijah Moore, I'm going to play Devon Vele for 800 less, and then move up at defense to the Ravens. Right? It's like, yeah, you're right. That projects for 5 points lower because Vele is literally 5 points lower than Elijah Moore. But the rest of my lineup, my 6 other players, look exactly like everyone else's lineup. So it's like the way that I win this contest, in this small field contest, is to have the chalk cash lineup completely smash, except Elijah Moore gets nothing and Devon Vele gets 28 points.
Right.
Like, but I need both. I need all the chalk to hit, which means all these. I'm still competing against, in a 200-person field, I'm still competing against 70 lineups. And I got to better hope my 1v1 does immensely better. I need all the chalk to hit in my 1v1. It's like, no, I'd rather half the chalk hit and half the chalk fail. And I just happen to have the combination of the right chalk with a 4v4 off of that with 4 guys that are all 5% owned. Where I just need one of, like, if Jerry Judy's going to be 5% owned, like, I need him to go off. If a guy like Marvin Harrison or Terry McLaurin or something like that goes off, if Devontae Adams goes off, if Mike Evans goes off, it's like that may all be, I may only need that because I don't, that lineup doesn't have Hubbard in it, and it has Brenton Strange over Stone Smart. So like this weird combination of Connor, Dowdle, Strange, and Evans is like, and then the rest is chalk. And then it's just not owned, even though all the guys in the lineup are owned enough. Like that's kind of how I play smaller field stuff. The larger field stuff is, I mean, you could tell this week. I mean, even this week, like most of the lineups towards the top, 100 are all like 150 maxers. I mean, the Sharps did very well this week.
Yeah, they did.
And you take a look at a lot of the plays, and it's like, yeah, as long as you played like the good plays and got like the right stack pivots, like you did great. Like the projections were the projections. I could have gotten to any of these lineups at the top of the Millie Maker. I could have gotten to any of these lineups. Had this is going to be my Mike Evans lineup. This is going to be my Devontae Adams lineup. This is going to be my, Brian Thomas plus Jerry Jeudy line. I mean, like all these guys were within my radar. I played 6 lineups, and I chose to focus more on the low 6Ks than the high, than the 7Ks. But I could have gotten to any of those lineups. I think they were all fine.
Yeah, that's really good. It's really good insight. I think that one of the things we talked about last year was approaching the 3-mans and those multipliers. And your theory was that you would rather do a 5v5 in those rather than a 2v2, hoping that because of the difference in the ownership and the relative value, you could win. You wouldn't win as often, but because the payout structure, you would win enough that you would end up with a positive ROI on it. And I think that's
right, but you still don't want to give up that much projection. I mean, you're not giving up tons of projection, but I'd much rather be combinatorically different because it gives me more shot. Because let's say you play. Let's use the example of like a quintuple up, right? A 5xer that only has 22 people in it, right, or maybe it's a 31, and the top 5 out of 31 make 5x their money or whatever the hell it is.
Sure.
Doing 2v2s, you're going to be sharing so many points with so many people. I'd rather just have it that I'm going to play the highest projected lineups that are 4v4s off, because I'll have at least 2 players in my lineup that are practically in no one's lineup. Right. So instead of playing, like if I look at yesterday's slate, instead of playing Jamar Chase in the lineup, let's go to the wide receiver. So instead of playing my instead of playing Chase and Moore, I played Jerry Jeudy and let's see, 1,200 less, and Terry McLaurin. It's like, well, these are two guys that are pretty much not in anyone's cash lineups. If either of these two guys go for 25 points, I probably win.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The only way I don't win is if Jamar Chase puts up 40 or Elijah Moore puts up 20 or something. Like, I have two guys that no one has that I could survive a dud in another spot, and if they go off, I win anyway. Right? Because Jerry Jeudy's 24.8 points is in no one's line. I'm the only one. He's 5% owned. Me and some other schmuck maybe have him, and that's it. Right? Yeah. And I have 4 of those types of guys, and my projection is still only 4 or 5 points off. Right? You would never do this in double ups, but in contests where you're going to get paid 4 or 5x the field, and you could predict what your opponents are going to do, which are practically going to play their cash lineup, and they just jam into all contests. I mean, I could just tell you who's going to be in everyone's line. On FanDuel, if you tried that thing in FanDuel, it's just like, dude, everyone's playing Calvin Ridley, Elijah Moore, Hunter Henry, Chuba Hubbard, and Zach Charbonnet. Like, all these guys are like 7. I mean, dude, these guys in my 50-50s were like 72% owned. Right? Yeah. So it's like, okay, so just instead of playing Hunter Henry, go up and play Trey McBride. And instead of playing Elijah, playing these wide receivers, like go down from the Ravens to the cheapest defense, go down to the Panthers defense, and then go up from Elijah Moore at 4,700 and play whoever, at some guy at 5,800, like whatever. I mean, like, you could just do that instead of playing Calvin Ridley. Play some. I mean, you'd look at the lineup and you'd run it through projections, and you go, "Oh, this lineup projects 4.5 points lower than the other one." It's like, well, that's fine because you're trying to 5x your money.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
but you're almost playing a head-to-head. Think of it more of like you're playing a head-to-head against like 20 other lineups. Mm-hmm. So when that one line, if you're playing let's say you're playing in a 10-man that plays winner take all, and your nine opponents are all playing the same line, like literally exactly the same lineup. You know what this is? This is a head-to-head. Yeah. So do whatever you can to maximize your chances of winning this, because if you beat one of the lineups, you beat all of the lineups. That's the same type of concept, that you want to be combinatorically more different in those types of contests. Like I said, not double ups. Right. We're talking about triple ups, quintuple ups, boosters, and small field GPPs, because small field GPPs tend to have ownership much more condensed on the higher projected, kind of cash game type of plays. So I'd rather go 4v4 in those contests. And in the large field contests, I don't mind going 2v2, because half my lineup is under-owned as it is, because people aren't playing the good plays well enough.
And so to flesh a couple things out there. First off, the drop in 4.5 median points doesn't matter nearly as much in this instance, because you are gaining like 40 points in ownership.
Way more. Probably even more than that.
Yeah. Remember that we're working with, you have to think about ownership as a salary. You have to think about ownership as something where you are paying a certain amount of ownership to also have those players. It's not just about the salary that you have. So when you're dropping that 4.5 points in median, if you had the same ownership and had a drop in 4.5 points in median, that's bad. We do not want that. You need to make sure that your ownership is dropping with the median that you are dropping, and preferably more. And then the other concept there, I think, that is important, and the reason why we're talking about in small field contests where ownership is condensed and in large field contests where ownership is not, think about it in terms of the reason why you want to have more leverage in a smaller field contest is because, say, 75% of lineups have competitive lineups that you would be sharing points with. Whereas in a large field contest, only 40% of the contests, or 40% of the entries, are having competitive lineups that you are sharing points with. So even though you're still sharing the same amount of points in both instances with the chalk plays, like you're sharing it with less of the field, aka you have a better chance, you have a better expected value of those lineups, not a better win equity, better expected value. Two different things there. If you want to learn more about that kind of thing, by the way, you could always go pick up Theory DFS, which Jordan and I have put together and is a terrific course. It's evergreen. It's still used by a whole bunch of people, and it's still used by both Jordan and I. I still incorporate concepts of this stuff over at Paydirt. He incorporates it in his process. I did want to give a quick shout out before we finish things out here to CK. I can't pronounce this full name, but he ended up having a third place finish. Paydirt subscriber. He did also end up taking down an NHL tournament this last week. So really, really nice windfall for him. He ended up getting this third place with an Aaron Rodgers lineup, which, you know, fuck me in the face for having one thing wrong. I got a lot of things right this week, but stoked for him. Good call out there. Do you have any closing thoughts here, Mr. Jordan, for this week?
No, I mean, David Montgomery's out.
That's is he out for a while?
Yeah, MCL injury.
Oh, man. Well.
So welcome to Jahmyr Gibbs Chalk Week coming up or whatever. Yeah, are they on the main slate? Are they even?
I'm not sure. I got to be honest with you. I'm pretty much checked out of NFL at this point. as we hit the end of the season, last 3 weeks, we start hitting silly season. Patrick Mahomes got injured. He's probably not going to play for the rest of the season, I would assume. Rest of the regular season, he'll be back for the playoffs. David Montgomery injury. All of the Lions are hurt. The entirety of the Buffalo team is dealing with injuries, and their defense is nothing. Like, we've hit silly season. And
they're playing the Bears. They're playing the Bears in Chicago this coming week. Jahmyr Gibbs.
Oh yeah, that's just terrific. As Jordan and I always say, we hit silly season the last quarter or so of the regular season of every single sport. And I always say, you should go play a different sport that is in the meat of the season when we hit silly season.
You don't like playing week 18 NFL where we have to predict where half the teams have all 3K wide receivers going and you have to predict which one actually gets. You're like, well, the team has a 23-point implied total, and every player on the team is 3K. And we have absolutely no data to support who is actually going to get the ball. So the industry will get together and go, well, it's going to be this guy. And what inevitably happens is either one of two things happens. It's never in the middle. Either the 24% owned 3K guy goes for 47 points, or he almost doesn't even make the snap, doesn't even play. Like, he ends up being, I remember Martavis Bryant week from a couple of years ago, where all the Raiders, where Devontae Adams was at, they just all sat everyone. It's like, oh, finally, Martavis Bryant is going to get, because he was like the fourth wide receiver. And it's like, well, he's like the only guy left that ever got any snaps. So we're all going to play him at 3,600. And he legitimately did not even take the field until the second half. Played 5 snaps, got 1 target, and got 0 points. And he was 28% owned. He was the highest owned receiver in the Millie that week and got 0 completely.
Yeah. I will not be partaking. I'm just gonna jam my props for NBA and maybe play some NHL, but won't be doing that. I am also looking forward to, I'm going to be doing some reworking of the League of Legends models. I'm working on that today, a little bit of data work. And then I'm going to start building out the best ball stuff. So for those of you that tuned in, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. If you have not gotten a subscription over at PayDirtDFS.com, you should absolutely do that. We have, models for all of the main sports, as well as esports, as well as tennis is here. We got models for everything over there. You can sign up for a monthly, a yearly, a daily, or a weekly, whole bunch of different options. And the Discord is free to join as well. So do that. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel, I think that you should do that as well. Just over 1,000 subscribers. Stoked on that. It's pretty exciting. And if you have any questions or comments, you can reach out to me either in the Discord or over at X, Twitter, whatever the fuck it's called, Patered_DFS. You can find Jordan at Blender HD, and also over at your YouTube channel. What is your YouTube channel? I know that you just revamped it.
That's / Jordan Cooper.
/ Jordan Cooper.
YouTube.com/Jordan Cooper. Whatever.
Well, yeah, whatever. Yeah, what the fuck ever. Yeah. Anyway, go subscribe to his channel as well. He's going to be doing a lot of theory stuff, and I call it money games. I call it money games, right?
It's just basically shit that I'm doing. It's whatever.
And you do
humor and entertainment. I mean, do stupid shit. I'm doing stupid shit on my stuff now. I'm not doing. Maybe you'll learn something. Maybe they'll be learning. Dude, I still have to edit together my fucking best gambling gifts for Christmas gifts for gamblers, right? That I did on my stream, right? So like that type of shit, right? Like it's stupid shit. Maybe there may be like like a tier list on what the best poker seat at a poker table is, like that, like stupid shit.
Anyway, go follow Jordan's stupid fucking channel. We'll talk to you guys later. There's a 2-gamer tonight. I'm going to stream it later. But thanks everybody for tuning in. I appreciate it. And yeah, we'll talk to you guys next time on Mondays with McCool.